layout than that tube that's on there. And that was Medline cutting that average to half of what they felt like they needed.
Bill wanted the amber on the whole job. And in order to get the performance they needed and the lighting they needed in the areas for safety, it would have been really, really hard to do that with the amber, correct?
Correct, because it's made for short poles in a coastal area or walkway area in that way. Whereas with the truck parking being as wide as it was, it's not reasonable to put poles in the middle of that long distance.
Okay.
In that way. And just to go back to that one fact too, all those lights on the building originally were 600 watt, they're 180 watt now.
So you diminished the wattage on the lights on the building, probably had to add some?
We had to add some, yes, yes. But that's the highest wattage on the whole site is 180, but just comparison, the amber, the highest one they make is only 100. So that's where we got in. It just doesn't have the punch. Amber lighting, think of some yellow lights, parking lots you've been in, some of the older ones. My meter likes it, that likes it, but our eyes don't like it. You only see about 70% of the light that puts out. So even though that's still at half, usable, it's below that. So from a safety standpoint, that was a major concern. The employees wouldn't have a half a candle, they'd have a 0.2 or 0.3 of usable light in that.
Okay. Does that help, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I had some other comments earlier, probably late in 2019, about some other safety ideas that the company could probably pursue. Some other comments on the lighting, and really I hadn't gotten any responses on the lighting until Friday. I didn't get the plan until this morning, so if we're responsible for reviewing the lighting, I'd like a chance to take a look at it, digest it, and know what we're approving.
Okay.
I don't know how everybody else feels, but I mean, that's my take.
Okay. Anyone else on the FEIS? I know that our consultants had some comments. Andrew, was there anything outstanding that needed to be addressed?
We generated a memo today. We got down to, I think, site plan issues. Our concerns with the FEIS were addressed. We were looking for some additional technical information. It's all site plan related, Fred.
Okay. I know that there were some issues with timing. We want to talk about that a little bit as far as how much time the public's going to have and how much time we're going to have. Because the seeker does require certain time frames.
Sure.
The seeker regulations provide that if an FEIS is accepted, there is a 10-day period during which no involved agency or the lead agency can act to issue findings. We've been asked by the board, and we've consented to doubling that period and making it run from the time of filing, so that there's not a single day that it's not available. The day it's filed will be the day it's up on the town website, and there'll be the full 20 days from that point.
Okay.
That's what, we've agreed to.
Okay. And then, isn't there a period of time that we have to adopt the findings after the FEIS is deemed complete?
The regulations provide a 30-day, I believe a 30-day period for the adoption of findings. However, that could be extended upon mutual consent of the board and the applicant.
Just for comparison, Sailfish took 117 days from the filing of their FEIS to the time a finding statement was adopted. I'm not suggesting this should take 117 days, but 30 days is just out of the question. I think Mr. Walensky would agree with me on that one. So,
First things first.
first things first. And let me back up. The 20-day period now up from 10 is public and agency consideration. It doesn't even use the word comment. we've interpreted that to mean all letters will be accepted and read if received within that period. But it's kind of an odd terminology. Public and agency consideration period.
Yeah,
Doesn't say public comment.
The purpose of it under the statute, as I recall, is they used to refer to it as a forced cooling off period. A time that has to be set aside to deliberate further on, in reaching a findings decision. So, but you're right, it's often a period of time where comments fly in anyway, so. The board's under no obligation to respond to them, but they do fly in.
And it's suggested that if and when you adopt this, and deem it ready to file, that the notice indicate this 20-day period, not so much for the public, they're here tonight and hear it, but the other agencies, how are they gonna know that they have a deadline? And, we would like to hear from them, but we can't go out 3-4 months.
It has to be in the notice of.
So I would think a one-line addition to the draft notice of completion might be a good idea.
We have absolutely no issue with that.
And then, my last procedural comment is, Mr. Walensky mentioned it, if you act tonight, I don't know if you will, but if you do, there's probably gonna be a period of time to get it in final form. And he alluded to that. And these time periods would run from when it's filed, because that's the first time the public can see it. And if you act tonight, I'm sure there's gonna be subject to some tweaks. I've got a couple of comments I'd like to make before we're done, not many, but they're kind of important. And until we get that back and see it's okay, that might take 4 or 5 days. So, if I may,
Yeah.
I did have a few substantive comments. This is based on a document I received on Thursday, and I think it's the last iteration. I think what we received tonight
Just a clean up.
repeats or cleans up, but I don't think there's anything new in here since the 20th of February.
Just the lighting plan and the lighting
Okay. And
specs.
I'll pass on lighting, it's not my bailiwick. Couple things, your new document does refer to the new Mike Aiello Jr. memo of Feb. 13th on sewer. Mr. Walensky referred to that earlier this evening. I want to make sure that all other references come out. I didn't have a chance because the prior iterations had reserve capacity that was greater, thank you, Rose, that was greater than what the newest memo says. And I just want to make sure that there's nothing inconsistent in the document. And that the January version had figures, I think 37.5, in a lot of different places. So I'd ask the applicant to make sure they all come out. What's new, and I think it needs clarification, it was page 2-76, now it's page 2-75. Seemed to say that our own stormwater expert, just like for Sailfish, paid for by the applicant but reports to the town, could only be on the site if more than 5 acres is disturbed. And I found that to be new and perhaps not acceptable. I think there may be some confusion between the applicant's stormwater expert, who's gotta be on the site pursuing, jump in here, Andrew, at any time, and our own person, who for the Sailfish approval is allowed on site at random. And if there's an emergency, doesn't even have to provide prior notice. This is all about making sure the stormwater operates effectively, and if there's a problem, it gets fixed immediately and not a week later. So 2-75, formerly 2-76, I would ask that that 5-acre requirement, in other words, is written, if 3 acres are being disturbed, then our people can't be on the site. I don't think that was the intention.
That was not our intention.
And if you clarify that, that would be good. The MS4 stormwater agreement for Sailfish was a Cadillac document. We took our simple template and really built on it and folded in all these extra enhanced stormwater measures and our own monitoring. I would ask that this document make a reference to the Sailfish MS4 agreement as a model for Medline. Not asking to be wordsmithed exactly, but we worked hard on that for Sailfish. I think it's a good document, and I see no reason to change it for Medline.
So let me go on record as saying we did something similar for enhanced erosion control, and we're okay with that as well. We'll make that reference.
Speaking of the enhanced erosion control, I'd ask that they be bullet items right in the FEIS somewhere. I think right now there's a reference to them, and I think you may have to go to the SWIP to find it.
It's in the site plans as well.
Site plan
Right on the
also?
Site plan, yeah.
You know, if we're gonna have an FEIS that people will wanna read, I'd like them to be able to see our enhanced measures that Jay Beaumont had a lot to do with for Sailfish. And I believe they're being carried over to Medline.
Yes.
Pretty much point for point.
Yes.
That's no problem.
And I think it would only take a page and a half to just bullet them, and then there can't be any confusion. And this is new, this is special for town of Montgomery, we're trying to go the extra yard on the stormwater. And so let's have everyone be able to easily find it. And my last comment has to do with SHPO. And there's been stuff lately, we just got a letter February 18th from Mr. Perazio, who indicated that 2 of the 5 sites are eligible for national and state registry. It was an interesting letter. We don't know where all that's gonna go, but page 1-42, in my view, comes very close to having the board make a finding in the FEIS that the phase 3 data recovery will be acceptable mitigation. It may not exactly say that, but the inference is there, and I would suggest that be stricken. If the FEIS is not a place to make findings, that will come later. And I'd like to hear from Mr. Perazio. I'd ask maybe Bonnie to reach out to him directly, so we can just hear it exactly from the source. Because I was kind of taken aback by his letter. I mean, they found some stuff out there, and how that's to be mitigated is the question. With all that said, I think it's time to get this thing in the public's hands. And if you plan to act tonight, I would ask that my comments be considered cleanup items to be addressed before the documents filed.
Okay, board, any discussion on the matter? Jay, Rose, John, Brian?
I just feel that the lighting is so highly integrated into the FEIS, and the fact that we just today received a letter saying that we've only gotten approval on the roadways or driveways, whatever we're calling them. And the board is responsible for looking at the lighting on the remainder of the site. I feel that we should take some time, look at it, know what we're looking at, and act on it at the next meeting.
Ryan, can I ask a question? May I ask a question?
Sure.
So, the board is responsible for the entire lighting plan, not the consultant. The consultants make the recommendations, and I know he's made recommendations here. I don't know if you know the details about the back and forth that has been going on with that. We believe that we addressed your comments, or most of them, if not all of them, in the FEIS. We keep being told that we haven't addressed the comments, but we're not told specifically exactly which ones haven't been addressed. My listening to all of this is that the real key in accepting the impact statement as complete is whether we've adequately, and you have adequately assessed the impacts. And we believe that the document that's there does that, and that any remaining adjustments could be completed at site plan review, where these kinds of things are often typically done. Because, you know, I've asked the question before, nobody's been able to tell me if the present lighting plan, you know, that is there, assuming it's just like it is in its current state, what impact is there causing? What impact is being caused? We have been on this lighting kick for, I don't know how many months now, and it just doesn't seem to be getting resolved. And it needs to be resolved. So if you could tell us even tonight while I have Matt here, what the specific concerns you have, we can perhaps address them tonight and make you, more comfortable with acceptance of an FEIS.
So I would agree that we have worked quite hard on this. We've gone back all the way to November, and I've got probably over 100 comments. Probably 99 of those have been answered, so I do appreciate your team's hard work on that. But since November, I've had comments about the lighting, and I've been told it's being worked out with the consultants. It will be responded to once the consultants have worked through this. So the consultants worked through it on Saturday, from what I'm understanding. And today I get the lighting plan that I've been asking for since November. And I would just honestly like a chance to look at it and understand what's going on in the whole site. So there may be some questions, and Matt did answer some of those today. But again, we're going back and forth. I'm looking at the cell phone on a plan that's 36 inches.
Well,
wide, so.
I suggested too, you should actually sit down together with a plan, and I think that would probably resolve it.
As far as building driveways, drive aisles, parking, that's not gonna change regardless of what we come up with as questions on the lighting. What would change is number of poles, performance of the lights, correct, Matt? Brian, do we agree that the only thing that's gonna change here is basically a lighting layout? We're not gonna move the building or anything like that, or change the grading because of the lighting?
I've never seen that done before because of lighting. That would be something up to them.
I
I mean,
think
we can
it-
control the lighting with the lights. That way. The only difference between what Bill approved and what's in the rest of it is that color.
That amber.
Yeah,
That's the
Amber
one
and
amber in the whole
2700.
thing. I know.
And that's the issue with it. So I just don't want you, I know you haven't had a chance to digest it, but it's not like we're using a whole different fixture, a glare bomb or, anything in that regard. It's just that different color of light. You're not gonna find amber lighting anywhere around here, and there's a reason for that, in that regard. So, it's kind of wrapped around in that way, because that's the only difference. The ratios, the averages, the uniformity is as good or better in the area with the 2700. And like, you wanted to see like on those grass areas and things like that, you'll see that tapers down to 0. And it shows that, nothing was played with on property line or anything like that. It was just left off, because those are such busy plans. We typically, when it's within the owner's property, from the pavement to the property line, they just don't have to show those statistical numbers. But as you'll see on there, they all taper down. It clearly shows what goes down to 0.
I think my guys are reminding me to mention that plan exceeds the town's zoning code standards. That the plan that is before us, with the exception of the most recent stuff done on the driveway, has been around since January, so.
Could one of the cleanup items be that Ryan gets a chance to look at this before this gets filed?
Sure.
Does that make sense? It gives us the few days it would take for you to look at it as.
Well, Fred, I don't know when the next meeting is, but we've addressed everything else. If we can take a look at this, I don't see why we couldn't act on the completeness at the next meeting. Is it March 9th, I guess they said?
It's 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Well, I'm talking for the applicant.
What do you? Pardon me? What do you think? What do you wanna do? You wanna wait till the 9th? Oh, then it has to wait till the 9th. We don't have enough people.
Okay.
Okay, we'll have to wait till the 9th.
Is it, can I just understand that this is the last issue that we need to resolve? I don't want, you know, between.
We're talking about the FEIS completeness
Yeah,
comment.
FEIS
This is
completeness.
the last thing. Everything else you'll have to clean up. Rich's comments,
Yeah.
you'll have to clean those up. And Ryan has to have a chance to look this over. He may have some questions on it. Fair enough?
Yeah, I would agree that, stormwater was resolved, last week with you guys, so I appreciate that, and this is the last remaining, item that I have on my list.
Any other board members have anything that we should pay attention to? Because I don't want to show up on March 9th and
I know that
be
Rich,
stuck again.
Rich is concerned about the view shed from 84, and that's gonna be part of the site plan, correct?
Yeah, what we did to address Rich's issue, we believe that our sightlines are correct and demonstrable, but Rich said, what if they're not? It's another idea to address the what-if scenario. We're putting a note on the plan that there'll be no certificate of occupancy if there is any loading dock that is visible from 84 or from 416.
That's the FEIS
Okay. Is that?
It's fine, and I appreciate it.
Okay.
I am not just imagining things. I
No.
looked at a series of maps.
No, we understand. Yeah.
And driven in a number of
No.
times, and
We-
pulled over and
we-
looked at the situation, and
We respect your, you know, your
Let 'em talk.
opinion on that.
Yeah.
And, you know, we respect your opinion on that, and we're, you know, fine with it. And we came up with something to address it, so.
I appreciate it. I just have to comment that from the beginning of the year, it's not substantial issues perhaps, but there's been a number of issues that have been moving targets. And perhaps the consultants have spoken to your team, or a few members of our board have spoken to your teams, but the rest of us all have to catch up to what's been going on and be able to agree that we're comfortable with the plan, and
Okay.
so that's all I'm
Understood.
trying to do here.
Understood, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, next this evening is National Builders LP, Von Rompay Trucking Corp., 134 Neelytown Road Warehouse.
That's two words, O-L-S. And then the second thing is F-E-I-S.
Okay. National Builders representing the applicant, Charlie Pizzillo. How are you, Charlie?
I'm good. Ready to sing, okay. Anyway, again, Charlie Pizzillo, outside counsel for National Builders. We're here for the continuation of the public hearing. I would point out to the board, this actually is the fourth public session we've had on the project. The board may or may not recall, back in October of years ago, 2018, we held what was called an informational public hearing. And we did send out notices about that to all of the properties within 500 feet. So, you know, so that actually acted as sort of the initial public hearing. We opened up the hearing in January of this year, continued it at the last meeting, and we're here now, so this is really the fourth session that we're here for. Since the last meeting, I believe, you know, Dave Young from Chazen has responded to and been working with Mr. Featherstone and addressing his, you know, technical questions he has on the project. We also did receive a comment letter from Mr. Marshall on behalf of some of the residents on Conklin Lane. And I believe that, well, I do know that Mr. Young and Chazen has responded to that. Specifically, the board has that in front of them. I'll just say in general, we can talk about the specifics, but in general, Mr. Marshall suggested a couple of things at the end of his letter about, mainly about adding more landscaping around the detention ponds, which we actually already have on our project site. Came about as part of the your landscaping consultant's suggestion also, so we have that there. There was suggestions about protocols. If we do have to do blasting on the site, we certainly don't have any objection about that in order to you know, document existing conditions on the houses. That may or, you know, that could potentially be an impact. We don't believe they would be, but it actually is in everyone's best interest to document existing conditions. Similar to water conditions too, there was a suggestion in Mr. Marshall's letter that the residents on Conklin Lane get a water sample from their wells before we may start the project. Again, we have no problem with that. We would ask to be copied on that, obviously, so we can all understand what the baseline conditions are. But we do feel our stormwater system is designed properly, that we're not gonna have any stormwater impacts or quality impacts on those homes on Conklin Lane. And that's pretty much where we're at this point. We're hopeful the board, based upon tonight, can hopefully close the hearing and move forward with the project. Again, first steps to get to a secret deck on the project is in the first order. And then certainly if there's any remaining technical issues about the site plan, we can go on and address those in subsequent meetings. So, right, so more than
Okay.
I meant to be short, but that's how it goes. So,
Dave, did you have any updates on the plan?
Just a couple things. I did hear from Anthony Trociano at the Orange County Department of Public Works, and he had been on unplanned leave for personal reasons. That's why he hadn't gotten back to us. He did say that he wanted to have an agreement in place for the maintenance of any of the stormwater facilities in the right of way, which of course that's not a problem with us. The lighting and landscaping have both been submitted. The lighting was submitted to Bill on the 11th and the landscaping on the 12th. As Charlie had said, we did respond to the Marshall letter that was received by the town, and we submitted that to you last Friday. There was one question in particular about the channel protection volume, and I have since that letter worked on some calculations to show that we indeed do meet the channel protected volume that was a concern. But that's something we'll have to address with the next letter on the project. And I believe that was about it. We did receive your notes on the blasting from the previous project. And I went through our blasting notes that were on sheet G002, I believe it is.
Yeah.
And I went through and added in the things that we didn't have there already. So
Okay.
that will be, again, on our next version of the plans.
Okay, thank you. I know that we do have a review we just received from Mr. Featherston. We'll get that to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, and maybe what I could do, just for the public, this is basically the blasting protocols, just to give you an idea of what will be required. Okay, I'll try to be brief. that any cuts and fills required on the site will be conducted in accordance with the Town of Montgomery local zoning law and any other applicable laws. That if it were determined that rock excavation and removal shall become necessary, the planning board will be notified and appropriate protocols and notifications will be established and permits will be required. That standard New York State protocols for blasting rock will be followed, and that only licensed blasters will be employed and state and local protocols will be followed. Okay, let's see. The impacts associated with the necessary blasting of bedrock will be mitigated by the implementation of controlled blasting techniques, including the use of appropriate delays, controlled loading to minimize the amounts of blasting agents, and proper matting and stemming techniques. Blasting will be conducted in accordance with federal, state, and local ordinances and will occur only as necessary and only during regular working hours on normal working days, not on weekends. Prior to any blasting, a request will be made to adjacent homeowners to conduct a thorough pre-blast survey to determine existing conditions. The blaster will be required to have insurance and be responsible to coordinate with adjacent homeowners on the pre-blast survey. A thorough pre-blasting survey, including evaluation of impacts to not only existing structures, but to any subsurface utilities, including water supply wells, will be implemented. And there's a list of 7 things here. Notification of neighboring properties and town building department, controlled access of the site, sounding of audible alarms, placement of seismic monitors to detect vibration and air blasts, placement of muting and stemming, placement of blasting mats to meet all federal, state, and local regulations. Monitoring of blast strength will be conducted during the blast, and seismic recording devices will be monitored to ensure blasting regulations are met. Seismographs will be placed along property lines with neighboring properties to document strength and impact of blast and to ensure compliance with federal and state regulations. So it's not just like somebody's gonna come in and start shooting things, you know? So there is quite a list of requirements to be considered if they have to blast, just so everybody has that information. Okay, this is a continuation of a public hearing, so we'll open up the floor for comments. And so if anybody has a question or comment, please feel free and just give us your name for the record.
Wayne Petzel, Concord Lane. Mr. Marshall received this response at 8:33 this morning.
Okay.
I got it at 9:48 or something like that. I worked till 4, and the meeting was at 7:30. There has been no time to review this, and I suggest that we table this so we can look at it.
Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Anyone else? Any questions? Yes, Sheree?
Yeah, a really quick one, just mostly for an education. How are the wetlands gonna be protected during this blasting, and that we know they're not gonna be affected? I know you're gonna protect the neighbors, but out of curiosity, how do we protect those? And considering we'll be altering the vibration rate of the land, what goes on to protect them, just for knowledge?
The standard erosion and sedimentation control plan will be put into place before anything like that occurs.
Okay.
And understand that I mean, we're talking about blasting, but it's only if it's necessary. The geotechnical report that was completed, which peppered this entire site with borings, the result was that most of the rock was rippable, and that's what they would anticipate for the earthwork that has to be done on this site.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Karina Tipton, Village of Montgomery. I just wanted to inquire on whether or not the revised site plans have got any kind of noise or sound shielding on the east side of the site, the Maybrook side of the site, that could protect Maybrook from this additional truck impact?
That was part of one of Mr. Marshall's comments, and follows through our comments also. So we're.
That's still under development? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
If I could
Yes, John.
Just real quick on that. Again, for facing the east side, there is a substantial wooded area that's gonna be left in place as part of the site plan. And in addition to that, we have added, additional vegetation around the stormwater basin that faces that eastern end. So we do believe that will further mitigate the noise levels from what we were predicting in the study. And the study that was done on it actually shows that we're not gonna have an impact off-site on any of the residential properties that are there. But that's without taking credit for any of the woods that are there, and then we've also added additional landscaping too. So in essence, the noise mitigation barrier, I don't want to call it a barrier, but the noise mitigation area is there already on the site plan, so.
Mr. Beaumont, could you bring up that plan and profile?
We have a landscaping letter from our consultant, where she's.
What's the date, Rich?
It's February 7th, 2020.
Okay.
And that's been responded to.
Several, there's been additional plantings of evergreens.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
As a part of the lighting, originally, we had put together a plan and profile to show the nearest residents, labeled existing residents up here. Over here. And then we show basically a baseline going right through over to the building, through the closest light that is designed for the edge of the parking lot there. You can see that, the line of sight has approximately 420 feet of vegetation on our property as well as the adjoining properties. The profile at the bottom shows the elevation of the home, the residence closest here. And then the line of sight going up to the light itself. And we didn't extend it up beyond, but you can see the top of the building there also. We interspersed wooded areas, staying 40 to 60 foot tall trees in there. We do admit that they are deciduous in nature, so they won't be like an evergreen buffer. But at the top of the detention pond, we did put a 6-foot high fence, as well as you see the Norway spruce, as well as white pines that are gonna be planted along the top of the detention pond berm. And we show it at full height, of course, but we'll be planting those at 6 to 8 feet. And white spruce in particular grow very fast, so they should be up to full height within 5 to 6 years.
Okay, where are those trees in relation to the pond? They are gonna
The
be.
pond is shown on here. There's a dimension across here.
Right, I get, Dave.
And right
but-
here's the edge of the berm.
On the actual. on
Oh,
the
I'm
actual
sorry.
plan.
Up here. Well, that's a good question, isn't it? They are right along here on the landscaping plan.
So that's-
Apparently the plan here didn't get changed, but the landscaping plan is changed and that's what was submitted.
That's right, but what I have was after.
Sorry about that.
The plan, the most recent plan we have is prior to parents' comments being addressed.
Right,
Okay, so there's been added trees and the fence is a 6-foot.
right. 6-foot fence along, and we have actually moved the fence to the top of the berm all the way along through there.
Okay.
So, and again, we'll provide slats in there if that's what the board would like to see.
Okay, and then you have the row of evergreen trees, coniferous trees between the fence and the existing wood line as it is today, right?
Between the fence and the pond, it's on the top of the berm.
Okay.
I just want to interject here. I got the letter that you're speaking about, I got on Thursday. I spent my Saturday going over it. I generated a comment letter that went out on Monday, today. One of the things in that letter, when I saw the the plantings on the top of the berm, that's what he means to show up there.
Right.
Trees are not to be planted on the top of a berm. Per the New York State Stormwater Design Manual, also from the design standards for dam safety, trees have a habit of falling over and ripping up soil and then possibly causing a breach. If it happens when they're full, you could have a problem. So the trees should not be planted on the top of that berm on the far side. Perhaps they should be planted between the parking lot and the detention basin. They'd be closer to the source of the noise, and they wouldn't be a threat if there was a tree to go down or burrowing animals going into the roots. It's in the stormwater manual, it's in my comments from today. Should be something that should be addressed.
Thank you, Andrew.
Fred?
Yes, Jay?
Rose and I spent a lot of time tromping in the woods with Blaine last couple of weeks. Thing that Larry made a point in his letter about the understory. It's easy to walk through that woods because there's not many bushes and stuff. And I think that basically the noise will travel there.
Okay.
There's a good 20 or more feet of before you get to the leaf line in most cases. I'd prefer, and given Andy's comments, and you mentioned the fence, a solid fence along the parking lot edges, not only on the, which this I'll call the south side, but also on the east side, because that also faces Maybrook. Maybrook, just by its location, gets whammed by Yellow Freight and the XO folks next door to this site, plus Maybrook Materials further down, came into existence before we had noise regulations and, for that matter, wetlands regulations. So I'd like to not exacerbate that problem any and try to spend a relatively small amount of money to do this whole size of this job, putting in a good fence to buffer the noise.
Jay, just if I could, Fred.
Yes.
Just so that the board understands, the parking area up on the top, the pavement up on the top is, let's say 350 elevation. Top of the berms on the stormwater is 342. There's a 10-foot difference dropping down to those stormwater ponds. Then there's another 10 feet going down to the grade, which does undulate down there, but the pavement is way on high, just so that the board understands where everything is situated, so that unfortunately the noise is on high and then goes down towards the homes in general.
So any attenuation to that noise should be up high by the,
I think it would be
by the source.
best served on the edge of that pavement, edge of the curb, behind a guide rail with the solid fence that Jay's speaking about, maybe supplemented with some landscaping.
Some evergreens, yeah.
Evergreens, yeah.
That makes sense, Don?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Floor still open. Anybody from the audience? Yes, Don?
Evening. So I missed the meeting, I was away, so maybe these things were answered that I didn't bring up. You know, I'm still thinking about that traffic out on Neelytown Road and what's going to be done. Just to remind this board that with this project, you also have added to that is Medline, Do It Best, FedEx, that are all asking for improvements, or Medline being a single project that's rather huge. So I guess what has been done in the thinking of traffic through there, I know that Ms. Penning's made comments on trucks being parked on Neelytown, creating quite a safety hazard up and down Neelytown. So which leads to me to ask, where's the county's involvement? Has the county gotten involved in this process? Are they going to have a cumulative traffic study with all these projects that's in and around the Neelytown area? What kind of communications have been made with the county?
We actually have gotten a comment letter back from the county, and one of the issues that it asked us to do was to take a look at our traffic study we had done, and to specifically add in the Medline, the potential Medline generated traffic. We did that. That information's been submitted to the board. It did show that this project would still not have any impact on the service levels on Neelytown Road. And so, so we had done a traffic study before that, the county came back, they are involved in looking at it, because we have a driveway cut onto the county road, and we've addressed their comments, and as far as we know, well, the data proves it, that we don't have an impact on the service areas, on the service levels on Neelytown Road, or any of the critical intersections around there.
Okay, thank you.
I gotta say something.
You gotta give me a break on this one. You know, Medline's saying they're gonna have 700 trucks, and this guy's coming up here and saying that's not gonna have an impact? On Neelytown Road, all right? It's gonna have an impact. So, you know, we've been going at this for a year and a half, and I think quite a bit of the residents here have made it very clear, we really don't dig the applicants' traffic studies. That's why we keep asking for the town to do it, for the county to do their own. Their traffic studies benefits them. For this gentleman to come up here and say that Medline's not gonna have an effect, holy mackalandy.
Yes, Andrew?
Our last comment letter dated today includes traffic comments as well. Had a traffic engineer looking at it as well.
I've been commuting for the past year and 2 months. My name's Jeff Van Zandt. I said my name before, but it's the same as it was about an hour ago.
We have to have it, Jeff, for each hearing.
Gotcha, okay. So I've been commuting from Montgomery to Brewster for the past year and 2 months doing a job up there, okay? I know what the traffic's like every day on Neelytown Road. It's a disaster now. 84 is a disaster now. So now all these people coming up here with these big projects, it's amazing how they say it doesn't impact anything. There's no impacts. This project doesn't impact that project doesn't impact that project. These are massive projects happening or could happen in the village, around the village, in the town. And it blows my mind how you all just sit up here and it seems like you're allowing it to happen. Carte blanche. Like it's been paid for somehow. Secretly, a company comes in, they'll buy a piece of property without any permits. Who does that with a house? Just buys a piece of property, says, I'm gonna build a house with a permit. They get the permits first. They take their time to do things. This company comes in, buys a huge piece of property, and they ask for permits later, and you're not gonna grant it. It's a joke.
Okay, board, any comments on this?
Could we just have Mr. Young explain where the blasting may occur? I think he said there's a couple isolated areas that may have harder bedrock or harder bedrock.
But we haven't determined exactly where that's gonna be, because it'll be a field condition if they get out there and it's not rippable in a particular location where there's deeper area of bedrock, then that's where it'll have to be. And there isn't a specific location right now.
You know where the deepest cuts on the site might be? Is that something we could look at?
Well, you basically have two ridge lines that come through both of these locations. Okay, so there's gonna be some cut to put this in, as well as this goes down and then comes back up again. And basically, it's like a W across the warehouse itself. This is gonna be definitely a fill area. This is a little bit below grade over here. And then in the middle, there's I believe a 5 or 6 foot cut. I have to take a look at it to make sure, but then there's some cut over here for this side. That embankment has to be cut down over there. This is pretty much a balance of cut and fill down here, with it being filled along the edges, coming down toward the wetland area, being filled along this side, you know, again. And then these are basically almost right at grade up there, so.
It looks like the east side of it is what would require the most excavation, as far as, because looks like there's a pretty good knob there, the trail runs up on the one side of it, and the
Right,
other side.
there's a cut right down in the northeast corner there, that does come up fairly high in there.
Yeah, 466 is about the high point on this, and your floor is 453, is that correct, Dave?
Right.
Okay, so 466 at the most, 53, 14 and a half feet It'd have to go down at the high point.
Right.
So it's a pretty balanced site, cut and fill?
There's a little more fill than there is cut,
Okay,
so.
okay. So it's just that, really that upper northeast, Ryan, that up in there, that area is what's gonna need the most, would need the most cut. But it's also fairly steep too. Right? You got-
Well, relatively, I
Yeah,
guess. but
I mean, the
not-
1
not
foot
really steep.
contours, I mean, you go 50 feet and you're down a grade up in that upper corner.
Right.
Okay.
So Fred, what was the notification limits for that blasting protocol you read? Was it 500 feet like the?
There wasn't
or was it just adjacent
a
homes?
radius. That's something we could, it would have to be, you know, we would have to maybe set that.
I mean, in this case, there's a very limited number of homes. I think we could probably pick up all of them, at least at the back end of that
Exactly.
development, so.
You may even wanna, the building up on the north side, right? The south, there's nothing, I don't think, is there, Blaine? It's just that, so it's vacant. Where the 134 and the other, there's a warehouse up there, they would probably wanna know too.
Could we have Andrew take a look at that and kind of give us a recommendation?
Yeah.
Radius or?
A blasting, yeah. Okay.
You guys want to propose something like that?
No, just for your reference, this is a 300-foot setback from the property line. And that's what's required in your regs, of course, for, truck parking within that 300 feet. But we're beyond that even, probably almost 400 feet to the edge of the parking lot there. And, that'll be the first area of significant cut,
Okay.
so.
So we'll come up with some parameters for that. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Fred?
Wayne Pencil.
Oh, hey, Blaine, sorry.
The two ridges that are, there's exposed rocks on those ridges. They're very close to them retention ponds.
Yeah.
You're gonna be blasting where my drinking water comes from. You're gonna be fracturing rock where my drinking water comes from.
Okay.
And has anybody here ever seen a tree mature for 5 years? I'm a woodworker.
You know.
Jack and the Beanstalks didn't grow in 5 years.
I apologize, I didn't mean the
Yeah,
full height.
yeah. You got a lot of apologize, as far as I'm concerned. This report doesn't even sound like the last 2 months. This sounds like a whole different piece of property.
Okay, now I wanna continue to beat the dead horse with the traffic study. And there are numerous projects going on within the villages, also the town, but also the DOT. There are several projects that, for the Hudson Valley alone, are gonna impact over the next 2 to 3 years. The same time these warehouses are being pushed through to roll their trucks out, are gonna be impacting everything else. On top of that, Legoland, when the advocates of widening 17 for Legoland, and also the tourist traffic going up to Sullivan County, if they have their way, there's no traffic whatsoever. It's all gonna be a standstill. It's gonna be a traffic jam from New York City to Albany.
Anyone else we haven't heard from on this project? John, you had a question?
Yeah, John Brown, Town of Montgomery. We had a question last time on the wetland delineation of when that was done. And I think a number of people brought up comments that with all the development in the area, wetlands tend to enlarge over time. So there's a question, has this been redelineated currently, that those wetland boundaries are adequate?
I believe.
Yes.
When?
Yeah, it's in the last response letter, it was, I believe,
Yeah, 2018 is 2 years ago. Wetlands changed within a year with major developments.
DEC regulations 5?
5 years, yeah.
That's regulations, but the board can ask for an update considering that there's been a tremendous amount of development, because wetlands enlarge big time.
We updated the wetlands because they had enlarged slightly down on the southern edge of the property, and that's why the delineation was done through DEC.
In 2018.
Yes.
But not since then. The board can ask for an update, and you should do that. The second point is, how much impervious surface is created with this development? How many acres?
I don't want to misquote that here, I don't have that right at my fingertips.
You're probably in the 20 range? What's your site?
Probably 15 to 20, yeah.
So how much extra overall stormwater volume is going to be going off the site?
It's in the way.
It's in
No, you have the rates, I'm asking volume. Because that volume will wind up in those wetlands and increase it, and you're right at the 100-foot limit right now. Those wetlands are gonna grow. And have you done a calculation of how they will be expanded as a result of that increased volume? I mean, any of the PEs up here will tell you, wetlands are constricted outflow and saturated soils. You put more water into them, they grow. One of the biggest causes of wetlands growing is increased volume. And I think at least, considering how close you are to the 100-foot limit, you ought to at least evaluate what that change will be, because I predict that they're gonna grow significantly with all that extra stormwater volume running into them. So that's my recommendation. Thanks.
Okay, I know that we've got a comment letter to get to you, and we have to analyze what we received recently. Entertain a motion to continue this hearing on the 9th.
Sure, if I could, before you vote on the motion, we've had other public comment tonight. I think the issues are still the same as we've heard in the last 3 meetings before this. I'm not saying that these are not issues that need to be addressed, and you know, they are issues that can be addressed. I think they're mostly site plan issues. I would still think that it would be the board's prerogative to close the public hearing so that we don't keep going over the same issues over and over again. And it would, I think it would be helpful for the board to do that. And again, you know, particularly about the noise issue, there's room on the site to address the noise issues. Stormwater's been studied. The site lighting's been analyzed. And again, these are issues I know the public has brought up, but they're not new. And they have to be addressed. So I do think it would be appropriate for the board to close the public hearing.
What about the impact of the residents? Just to jump back to 9:15, we got all this stuff at the last minute.
Reconvene on the 9th at 7. Do we have anything else on the 9th? Yeah. Did we do 7:40 on the 9th? Medline's not public, not public hearing.
No, we got Medline on.
Okay. Motion by Rose, seconded by John. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
This is a public's notification. We're gonna we'll talk about this. Hopefully we'll have some updates on the plan. 7:40 on March 9th. Thank you. Bless you. Next this evening, we have Bracken 20 warehouses, Bracken Road, Leonard's Drive, SE permit site plan and 2-lot subdivision. This is a continuation of that public hearing.
Good evening.
How are you?
Good, how are you? John Ahern, Berkeley Golden Milton, attorneys for the applicant, Jason. Here at your last meeting, there was some outstanding comments from your engineer. I believe we satisfied them. We're here for continuation of the public hearing, and we've been open for some time now. So we'd like to see if we can make some progress tonight and move towards a future determination. As for site plan changes, I'll valid.
Okay.
We had submitted back on the 14th to Andy, basically trying to address a time and concentration issue that he had raised in his latest letter. Since that time, we had talked on the phone, and he has some additional comments about the other times of concentration that we took a look at. And this was last Friday is when we became aware of this, and we revised the model to see what the impacts were, and we were able to get it to the point where the 10 and 100-year storm were addressed, and then the channel protection volume, or the 1-year storm, was also significantly managed on those plans. I guess at this point, I'd like to sit down with you, Andy, and just walk through whatever's left. I mean, to me, there's a few comments in the last letter that we just, you know, it was like typo type of things, and just making sure the setbacks were okay with the water well versus the septic, things like that. Those are easy to address. It's just making sure that you're comfortable with the stormwater management plan that we presented to you. You know, likewise, that one, the biggest concern we had over the first time of concentration change was that we couldn't make the 100-year storm work in the middle, but when we separated the discharges so that one discharge went to the DEC wetland and one went to the core wetland, then the 100-year storm worked. So I think at this point, if we could just sit down and get that worked through, that would be easy enough to take care of any of the remaining engineering comments. And then the landscaping was submitted on the 20th of January. We haven't seen anything back on that yet.
Okay, I'll work on Karen.
Fred,
Yes, very good.
Dave, I have no problem meeting, of course.
Yep.
The comment letter I gave to Dave it's technical stuff, but on the comment letter I gave to Dave said, look at the entire site. We sketched where we believed there was a change that needed to be made in the calculations. And we said, here's one example, look at the rest. So now we're still here because we didn't look at the rest before. I didn't pick, I think it could have been more expedited, is what I'm telling you. I said it the first time, look at everything, and you know, the applicant looked at one. So that's why we're still here.
Okay.
I don't think it's it's not a showstopper, it's something that needs to be corrected and moved on, that's it.
Okay. This is a continuation of a public hearing. Entertain comments from the public, comments or questions, and please identify yourself for the record. Anybody? Yes, Cherie?
Cherie Zahakis, resident. If you can view the site plan, I do not recall what the exact page was, but it delineates the property lines, and it also delineates the 60-foot setback requirement from the road. I ask that if you look at that, as I looked at the plans and measured it, I found that both parking lots ingress on that frontage requirement. The code states that there is to be nothing in that frontage requirement. Once the frontage requirement has been met, in this case, a minimum of 60 feet on Bracken Road, and then they can place a parking lot. I believe by definition, if you want to tell me a collector road, but by the code book, it appears that Bracken is definitely a collector road, and the 60-foot setback has not been met in either one of those parking lots. I spoke with Walter in my
What did Walt
review.
say?
He actually said, oh dear, and that he hadn't had time to review the plans before they were given to you, and that there was a problem.
Okay.
And I'm just bringing that up because if you look in the site plan, you will see the generic outline, and they actually show, because it's 75 feet normally, except with the frontage table, it allows a minimum of 60 along Bracken Road. So the piece that goes along is not being met. Leonard's Drive is, because I do believe they meet the 75 going back in. So if you look at their line and then you overlay where the parking lots, in this case, both parking lots, some are more invasive into that frontage than others. But both parking lots have that problem. And so therefore they are not to our code plan. So I had mentioned it the last time, and I believe the applicant stated he thought it was only collector and arterial roads, but Bracken is a collector road, I believe by the definition.
Didn't we look at that?
My recollection was that I looked at the New York State DOT website, which identifies collectors and arterials, and Bracken Road didn't show up on the DOT site.
Correct. Okay.
So, I'll review that.
In
look at it.
our code book on page 11, it defines street collector as those streets which carry traffic from minor streets to major system of arterial and highways. Both 208 and 17K are highways, and Bracken is in fact a collector because it is even getting more and more, so much so we're gonna have to put a light on it. So I would believe that would by definition be termed a collector. And then when you go back into, and that's by our code, which I believe this hometown perhaps may have a ruling different, I don't know, that's a question. But then when you get back actually into your table of your dimensions, it actually calls out Bracken specifically. And it states that it is a minimum of 60 feet, 75 otherwise, is the normal frontage for businesses. So in fact, I would think, and that's my question, I believe it to be a collector by our definition in our code. I also believe that it's not meeting that 60 feet. Now, they can move it behind that 60 feet, it meets our criteria. But the fact that Bracken is specifically called out in our dimensional states to me that it's being considered perhaps as one of the main roads. There is a section that describes other road aspects in those setback requirements as it meets, but in this case, either one. And Walter.
Just so I'm clear, you're looking at the zoning code, and you're looking, when you say dimensional requirements, 60 feet and 75 feet, are you referring to the table of bulk requirements?
I am looking at the very back where it is in the table of dimension. When you go into the code where it talks about the requirements of setback for residents, and then it talks about for on non-residentials, it refers, and then you go into the dimensional table, which is here, and it's right here. It is section 7020 business and industrial districts. It talks about I-1 and I-2, which is what this is. It talks about what the front yard is, and it talks about it being actually a 75 for the yard minimum for the front. But then it goes down, and it does give the exception in the book where it talks about Bracken will have a parcels fronting Bracken Road shall have a minimum front yard requirement of 60 feet. And that is a minimum.
Yeah, that's for building.
That's for it.
That's for buildings.
Right.
These dimensional requirements are for structure.
Not necessarily
Parking or roadways or.
Oh, when you go into the zone, and the way I read each one of these and kind of pirouetted through the book back and forth, it definitively defines what a front yard is, and that it must have a front yard. And then it talks specifically about businesses in that frontage area, that no parking lot and nothing can be placed. Now, a driveway can come in and you can go behind that frontage. But once you get behind that frontage, then you can put your parking lot. And that's very specific in the book.
That's for the road.
That's for the collector.
The whole issue is Bracken a collector?
Right.
To me, that's the issue.
Yeah.
We don't disagree with anything you're saying. is Bracken collector or is it not? If it is, you can't park in the front yard setback, whether it's 60 feet or 75. If it's
That's
not,
right.
it's clearly not an arterial two-part test. The question is it a collector? And our code defines collector as taking from a minor road to a major road. Here we have a somewhat of a unique situation, connecting two major roads.
I don't know if once upon a time, I mean, we'd have to see if there was anything in the comprehensive plan where sometimes a traffic section will actually identify what at that time was considered a collector arterial.
Yeah.
All I can say is, what, you know, the one resource I could look at the time, was New York State DOT has a functional classification viewer. The New York State DOT classifies every road, in the entire state, whether it's a collector, an arterial, major expressway, highway, and then anything it doesn't designate as that, it calls a local road. When I looked at that viewer, my recollection was it said that Bracken Road is a local road. So I think the question is, and it's something I can discuss with Rich, is what was the intent in terms of the definitions? Is there some other resource to look at in terms of how the roads have been classified in the town? Because the resource I relied on was New York State DOT.
I couldn't find any list of Bracken Road is this, or what is collector, what's arterial.
Right.
It's not written. You have to kind of go through the process. So we'll get.
Thank you. And I did speak with Walter, and Walter was a bit concerned with it too, so I'm not gonna
Yeah.
outspeak.
I talked to him the same day.
Okay, so we got it. So again, that's perhaps more review and a little more nuance. Thank you for your time. You're welcome.
I'm sorry, who is Walter?
Walter Schmidt, building inspector.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure.
Anything else on Bracken 20? Board, any questions? No, I think they're. Yes, but I don't think it, and that parking, and that stormwater, I think we're back. There may be a project or two on Bracken that is out close to the road we'd have to look at. We did look at the one across the street, and it just touches the curb. Yeah, so, but we will look into that.
Did we ever discuss, street signs
Street signs?
for these buildings?
Road signs. I believe we did.
There's a detail on there for both sites
Okay.
showing the sign.
And what they're gonna have is they leave and they keep them going the right way.
And no left-hand, or no right-hand.
Yeah.
Right.
Anything else, anyone? I mean, we've gotta get to the bottom of this, because if that had to change, it would have to change.
I don't want to start an argument or anything, but we had raised this issue way back when we first started the layout on the design. And it was our understanding at that point that Bracken was not a collector road. That's why it's designed the way it is. If we would have been told we couldn't do that, and we would have pushed everything back to the back and accommodated that. But
I understand.
That's why we have hearings though, try to catch our little errors that may not be errors, I'm just saying. I'm sorry.
And we've got some things to work out with the drainage yet, Andrew, correct?
Yes.
All right, bring this in tonight also,
Will that give us enough time to determine?
the drainage issue, the front yard, I believe, 2 weeks. And we have a workshop to talk about it.
It's true, yeah.
So we can hash it around a week from Wednesday. 7:50 on the 9th, this will be the public's notice. We continue the hearing on 9th of February at 7:50. Motion by John. March, I'm sorry. Days. Motion by John, seconded by Ryan. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. and I'll get in touch with Karen. Okay. Next this evening is, Lee Gizarelli.
We're on the big screen, you graduated.
Good job.
Good evening, for the record, Ross Wunderlich with Engineering and Surveying Properties. Here on behalf of Lou Gizarelli, this is a continuation of the public hearing. The only comment we had was regard to the location of the house on the remaining lands. We submitted plans for this meeting showing the house being relocated away from the neighboring property line, centered it on the lot.
Is that the drawing you want?
Yeah. The next one. Zoom it up. So we presented that on. There was a response letter we prepared to Andrew's comments. And we're here to ask the board to close the hearing, issue a negative declaration. Grant preliminary so we can go to the health department. This is part of the subdivision that was previously approved by the health department, so the new lot will need to go to the health department.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here from the public has any comments on Gizarelli? Okay, board, any comments or questions on this project? I think we're probably prepared to close the hearing on Gizarelli. I have a motion to close the hearing by Jay, seconded by Rose. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll get an egg deck started. We don't have one done yet, sorry. We closed the hearing, sorry I had to go around so long.
See it?
Yes. Next thing this evening is Russin, for the road bond for Meadows. Meadows upon 18 lot clustered subdivision, recommendations of road bond reduction for section 2 with proposed road names, Haynes Lane and Hattie Scott Lane. Any discussion? As the paperwork, bond grand total is reduced now down to 86,183.15. Does that make sense? No, the bond is 74,941.87. Contingency cost 11,241.28. It's down to 86,183.15. Anybody have any comments on it? It seems to be okay. Andrew, you look at this, right? Okay. So motion to reduce the, accept the road bond reduction by Rose, seconded by Rich. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
If I may, I did a memo today, and it could be passed on to Mr. Feeney, because I know we keep wondering what has he got to do to get his section 2 map signed, and what he just did is part of it, but there's more to it. There's offer dedication for roads, there's drainage easement, bunch of things. So I put him in a short memo, and you can pass that on to Albert, so he can get his people working on those other items.
Next up this evening is,
Fred, I believe one of the Medline group people left us.
oh, thank you.
Or you want me to?
Say something now.
Next this evening at Russin Factory Finishing on, this is on Bracken Road, SU, permit site plan, lot line change. Asking for notice of intent to declare lead. Any discussion, board, on Russin, declare lead agent?
Ryan and I walked the site.
How'd it look?
Do you want us to just spend a minute on what we saw in? Or no?
Maybe when we open the hearing,
Okay.
right, as you, right?
Yeah, we'll complete our comments and then.
Sure, sounds good. All right, a motion to declare lead, certainly, by Ryan, seconded by Rose. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, are we doing a coordinated or uncoordinated review?
Some listed.
Who else is out there? DEC Article 24. That's the only other one that we would have.
Army Corps would be interested. If Army Corps were involved, they would be interested.
Right, exactly.
There might be a DEC well.
Yeah.
Oh, there is definitely a DEC wetland.
DEC, Army Corps.
And we have a,
Department of Health?
no, we won't have enough employees to require a community water supply, and we're only gonna have about 120 gallons to 144 gallons of septic, so it would be a local review on that. So the DEC Article 24, and the only reason I ask is that when we submit that plan, do we just submit an EAF to them and they'll do their own seeker? I just need to know procedurally.
I've only found that some communities, DEC actually won't take action on the permit unless the board has completed seeker here at the local level. So, I don't know that you'll get far in terms of seeker.
We have,
permit.
yeah, we have with that, with Mike Kratz, we've been able to process uncoordinated reviews. They just need the EAF at that point. And know that this board is doing an uncoordinated review if you choose that way.
I have on my folder that we discussed it before and decided on unlisted, but I don't remember the
Yeah.
details.
It did.
Decide whether you want to record, if you like it or not. It depends on the magnitude and the number of agencies.
There's just two other agencies.
I was just really just the DEC. We got the highway superintendent will issue a driveway permit, but that review goes through this.
You don't need any district extensions?
No, we are in we are in both water district. Water District 2B.
2B or
and
2C.
Yeah, it's 2B and Sewer District 2B.
Needs a waiver to not connect to the sewer system. Is that-
No, there's no waiver, we're just
No
not
waiver.
we're not within that required distance to connect.
Okay.
Okay. So probably unlisted, uncoordinated then, right? Yeah, we don't have to coordinate. I don't think so.
Because we'll start our DEC application immediately then and send them,
Just send it.
at the same time, but we just need to know which order to put it in. Thank you.
Okay. So, uncoordinated then, motion to declare lead by Ryan, seconded by Rich. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, they did a motion earlier.
Oh, Ryan Rose, okay. That's fine.
So change it or?
Go Ryan Rose. Okay. 160 Stone Castle Road, Matos Contracting, did we get the form? Waiting on financing. And standard note, if an extension is granted, applicant must comply with all applicable laws and regulations that may have been adopted since the original approval date or during any extension periods. Any discussion on that, Sos? No, and it'd be a 6-month extension
August 28th.
to August 28th of 2020. Motion to grant the extension by Rich, seconded by Rose. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next to last but not least is approval of the April 30th planning board meeting minutes. Anybody have anything of substance?
I just had a question. We cited Mr. Jacobowitz was here for Hot Blossom. I'm thinking it was either Mr. Wingovitz or Mr. Capello.
Capello.
I didn't recall Mr. Jacobowitz.
Yeah, it was my mistake.
So we will get that straight.
Right.
But I wasn't on the board, and I think I have to abstain on that. Do we have enough people?
Yeah, I made a note, sorry to interrupt, that only Frank J., Rose, and Rich can vote.
Right.
They're so old that you gentlemen were still in grade school.
Motion to adopt the minutes by Rich, seconded by Jay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion to adjourn. Ryan, thank you. Ryan, everybody. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thanks for coming out, everybody. I think they will.